Deep beneath the stones of Ireland's most haunted castle lies a punishment designed not just to end a life, but to completely erase it. It was a dark, silent pit where prisoners were dropped through a trapdoor and simply forgotten. This is the story of the Oubliette, and why the horror that awaited inside was considered far worse than a quick death. The medieval world was a landscape of raw survival. Justice was often swift, brutal, and very public. Hangings, beheadings, and burnings at the stake were common spectacles meant to scare people into line. They were terrifying, sure, but they were also final. Death was an event with a clear ending. But what if the goal wasn't just to kill? What if you wanted to inflict a punishment so long, so psychologically crushing, that death itself would feel like a mercy? In the heart of Ireland, in County Offaly, stands Leap Castle, a fortress that has seen centuries of betrayal and cruelty. Its most terrifying secret isn't the torture rack or an Iron Maiden, devices that, let's be honest, were mostly exaggerated inventions from later centuries. The horror at Leap Castle is something far more primal. It's a chamber whose name comes from the French verb oublier, meaning to forget. This is the story of the Oubliette at Leap Castle. It's a tale that peels back the layers of myth and history to reveal a chilling truth about the depths of human cruelty. To understand why this punishment was engineered to be worse than death, we have to journey back in time to the violent world that created it and the blood-soaked clan that perfected its use. Before it was known as Ireland's most haunted castle, the site of Leap Castle was a place of ancient power. Legend claims the land has been occupied since the Iron Age, maybe even used by Druids for their ceremonies, though there's no hard archaeological proof of that. It's one of those places where the veil between worlds just feels thin. The first stone fortress, built around 1250 AD, was called Leap Uibanan, or Leap of the O'Bannons. The O'Bannon clan were local chieftains who picked this strategic rock to guard a key pass through the mountains. But even the castle's origin story is soaked in blood. The legend says two O'Bannon brothers were fighting for leadership of the clan. To settle it, they agreed to a deadly contest. Both would leap from the rocky outcrop where the castle was to be built. The survivor would become the chieftain. And so the very foundation of Leap Castle was laid on an act of fratricide, a pretty dark omen for the future. The O'Bannons built their stronghold, but they didn't hold it for long. A more powerful and far more ruthless clan, the O'Carrolls, soon cast their shadow over the region. Seeing the castle's strategic value, they seized it. While the O'Bannons may have laid the first stones, it was the O'Carrolls who, over the next few hundred years, expanded the fortress and carved its name into the darkest pages of Irish history. The main tower we see today was likely built by the O'Carrolls in the early 1500s, cementing their bloody reign in stone. Under their rule, Leap Castle transformed from a strategic outpost into a theater of horrors, where loyalty was temporary and life was cheap. The O'Carroll clan wasn't just a ruling family. They were a force of nature, a dynasty defined by ambition and a shocking capacity for violence. For nearly 3 centuries, they were the masters of Leap Castle, and their rule was a non-stop saga of assassinations and betrayals. They were known for turning on enemies and allies with the same ferocity. If the walls of Leap Castle could talk, they would scream. Perhaps nothing captures the O'Carroll family vibe better than the legend of the Bloody Chapel. After the clan chieftain died in 1532, a vicious power struggle erupted between his sons. Two brothers, One-Eyed Tage and his brother Thaddeus, who was a priest, became bitter rivals. Now, there's no primary historical record of this event, but the local folklore has been passed down with chilling consistency. The story goes that one day Thaddeus was holding Mass in the castle's chapel. His brother Tage, in a fit of rage and ambition, burst in, drew his sword, and plunged it into his brother's back. The priest collapsed and bled to death on the very altar where he was celebrating Mass. From that day on, the room was known as the Bloody Chapel, a name that has stuck for almost 500 years. This act of killing your own brother in a holy place sent a clear message. For the O'Carrolls, nothing was sacred in the pursuit of power. There was no line they wouldn't cross. Their reign was filled with stories like this. They were masters of the surprise attack, the poisoned drink, and the midnight assassination. But the O'Carrolls' creativity didn't stop at quick, violent acts. They cultivated a method of punishment for their enemies that was far more sinister, a method that relied on terror, isolation, and the slow, agonizing death of hope. Deep within their fortress, they perfected a chamber for this exact purpose, a place where their enemies wouldn't just be killed, they would be completely and utterly forgotten. In a corner of the Bloody Chapel, hidden from sight, lay the entrance to Leap Castle's darkest secret. It wasn't a grand dungeon with rows of cells. It was something much smaller and much more sinister, a hole in the floor covered by a trapdoor. This was the Oubliette. As we mentioned, the name comes from the French verb oublier, to forget. The name itself tells you everything you need to know. You weren't sent to the Oubliette to be imprisoned. You were sent there to be erased. Now, we have to be careful here. The whole idea of the oubliette, especially the kind lined with spikes, is a hot topic for historians. Many scholars argue that these gruesome pits are more a product of 18th and 19th century Gothic horror stories than actual medieval practice. They argue that many so-called oubliettes were just storerooms or even toilets, and their gruesome reputations were invented centuries later to attract tourists. The idea of a lord casually tossing victims into a spike pit is, for many historians, largely a myth. And yet, the story at Leap Castle refuses to be so easily dismissed, because what was supposedly found in this pit in the early 20th century makes it hard to believe it was just a storeroom. According to the legend, which is inseparable from the castle's history, this was a purpose-built killing machine. The shaft dropped about 8 feet into total darkness, and at the bottom, waiting in the gloom, wasn't a stone floor, but a bed of sharpened wooden spikes. The design was diabolical. A victim would be pushed through the trapdoor, falling into the void. The fall itself wasn't high enough to kill you, but the landing was another story. The spikes were supposedly placed not just to kill, but to maim. You might be impaled instantly, but it was just as likely you'd land between the spikes, horribly wounded, or with a spike piercing a limb. This pit became the O'Carrolls' private disposal system, a place to drop enemies or inconvenient allies. Whether the spikes were always there or a later O'Carroll home improvement project, their alleged presence transforms the pit from a dungeon into something else entirely. It becomes a machine designed for maximum suffering. This is where modern historical skepticism clashes with a terrifying local legend. a legend that would be given horrifying weight by a grim discovery centuries later. To really get why the oubliette was considered worse than death, let's do a grim comparison. Think about a typical medieval execution, a hanging or a beheading. Brutal, public, but for the person being executed, relatively quick. There's a moment of terror, maybe a final prayer, and then it's over. The suffering, while intense, is measured in minutes. The oubliette was designed to stretch that suffering out for as long as possible. It wasn't about the moment of death, it was about the process of dying. It begins with the fall. The floor suddenly gives way and you plunge into absolute blackness. You have no idea what's waiting for you. Then the impact. Best case scenario? A spike goes through a vital organ and it's over quickly. But what if you weren't so lucky? What if a spike just pierced your leg or your shoulder? You're now trapped, horribly wounded, in a dark pit with no chance of escape. But the true distilled horror of the oubliette was for those who missed the spikes entirely, or if the spikes are just part of the legend. You'd land, maybe with broken bones, on a floor littered with the decaying bodies of who knows how many others. And then the real punishment would begin. First, the darkness. Not just dim light, but a total absence of it. A sensory deprivation that makes your mind come apart. Hallucinations would start, fueled by terror and the stench of death. Then comes the thirst, a desperate, clawing need for water, followed by hunger, a gnawing emptiness that turns into agonizing cramps. And all the while you are utterly alone. The design of some oubliettes was pure psychological torture. They were placed so the victim could hear the faint sounds of life from the castle above, laughter, music, people walking around, a constant, maddening reminder of a world you could never rejoin. This was the point. The name, to forget, wasn't just for the captors, it was for the victim. You were thrown in that hole to understand, in your final days or weeks, that you had been completely erased. No one was coming for you. Your screams would be swallowed by stone. Compared to a hanging, the oubliette was a slow descent into madness. It wasn't just an execution, it was the deliberate, systematic destruction of a human being, body and soul. To be left in the dark, surrounded by the bones of those who came before you, knowing the same fate awaited you, a quick death on the executioner's block would have seemed like a blessing. The O'Carrolls didn't just use the oubliette for rival soldiers. According to the grim folklore of the castle, they saved it for their most shocking acts of betrayal. Now, you won't find these stories in official records, but they've been passed down for generations and are key to the castle's dark reputation. One of the most famous legends is about how the O'Carrolls would hire other clans as mercenaries. Around 1599, they reportedly hired the McMahons to help them fight a rival. After the McMahons secured a victory, they were invited back to Leap Castle for a huge celebratory feast. The soldiers, expecting rewards and a good time, were treated like kings. But it was all a trap. The legend says that as the McMahons slept, the O'Carrolls moved among them and slit their throats. Why? It was cheaper than paying them. Their bodies, the story goes, were then dumped into the oubliette. A similar story is told about the O'Neill clan. They too were hired as mercenaries, won a battle, and were invited to a feast. This time, the food and drink were poisoned. Those who didn't die from the poison were cut down by swords. The legend claims nearly 40 O'Neills died that night, their bodies joining the others at the bottom of the pit.
These tales of treachery, whether true or not, served a purpose. First, It was a ruthlessly efficient way to get rid of potential rivals. A clan strong enough to fight your battles is also strong enough to fight you. Second, it built a reputation of terrifying unpredictability. No one could ever trust the O'Carrolls. This aura of treachery was a weapon in itself. The oubliette was central to this strategy. It was the perfect way to make people disappear. No bodies to bury, no mass graves to be discovered. It was a clean, silent, and final solution. These legends show that the oubliette wasn't just a dungeon. It was a tool of O'Carroll politics, a pit for the betrayed, a final resting place for anyone who made the fatal mistake of trusting the masters of Leap Castle.
For centuries, the oubliette remained a secret, its contents sealed within the bloody chapel. The O'Carroll clan's power faded, and the castle passed to the Darby family in the 17th century. The whispers and legends of the castle's bloody past continued, but the physical evidence remained hidden. Until the early 20th century. During a renovation, sources disagree on the exact year, sometime between the 1890s and 1922, workers stumbled upon the secret. While cleaning out the bloody chapel, they found the trapdoor. Prying it open, they were hit with a wave of foul air, the stench of centuries of decay. The pit was not empty. According to the workers' accounts from the time, it was filled with human skeletons. The story that came out was horrifying. It supposedly took 3 full cartloads to haul away all the human remains. The estimated number of skeletons was around 150. Many were said to be impaled on the sharpened wooden spikes at the bottom, just as the legends described. Of course, we have to take these numbers with a huge grain of salt. 3 cartloads and 150 skeletons are part of the legend passed down from the workers. They have never been verified by modern archaeological analysis and were almost certainly exaggerated over time. But even if the true number was a fraction of that, the discovery of a hidden pit filled with human skeletons is a profoundly disturbing confirmation of the castle's violent past. To make things even weirder, the legend says a small object was found among the bones, a pocket watch dated to the mid-1800s. This detail, also uncorroborated, is a chilling part of the puzzle. It suggests the pit may have been used long after the O'Carrolls were gone. It raises the disturbing question of who the later victims might have been. The discovery of the oubliette and its horrifying, if exaggerated, contents solidified Leap Castle's reputation as a place of profound darkness. It was no longer just a bunch of ghost stories. Here were the bones of the forgotten, brought into the light for the first time in centuries. It's said that when the workers cleared the skeletons from the oubliette, they didn't just disturb bones, they awakened something else. The act of unsealing that mass grave supposedly unleashed a torrent of paranormal energy, supercharging the hauntings for which Leap Castle is now world famous. Here, the line between history and folklore blurs completely. The spirits of Leap are tied directly to the castle's violent past. The ghost of the murdered priest Thaddeus is said to still haunt the bloody chapel. But the unearthing of the oubliette is often linked to the castle's most terrifying entity, something that feels far older and more evil than a human ghost. It's known only as the elemental. It's described not as a person, but a thing, a hunched gray creature the size of a sheep, with a decaying face and black pits for eyes. Its appearance is said to be accompanied by the horrifying stench of a rotting corpse and sulfur. Some believe it's an ancient nature spirit, tied to the land long before the castle was built, angered by the centuries of bloodshed. Its most famous appearances are linked to Mildred Darby, the owner's wife in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Mildred was a writer of Gothic novels and loved the occult. She held seances in the castle, and many believe her dabbling in dark arts either attracted or fully awakened the elemental. In a 1909 article, she described a terrifying encounter with the creature.
Other spirits are said to roam the halls. The Red Lady is a tragic figure carrying a dagger, the ghost of a woman captured and brutalized by the O'Carrolls, who then took her own life. The spirits of two young girls, Emily and Charlotte, are said to play in the halls. Today, Leap Castle is a private home owned by the musician Sean Ryan and his family, who have been restoring it since 1991. They report living in relative harmony with the castle's many spectral residents. The castle now stands as a living monument to its own dark past. The history of the Oubliette and the spirits it supposedly unleashed are a constant, chilling reminder that at Leap Castle, the past is never really dead, and the forgotten are never truly gone.
So, why was the oubliette at Leap Castle a punishment worse than death? The answer is in its malicious design, which targeted not just the body, but the mind. A swift execution, for all its brutality, acknowledges the victim. It's an event. There's a body, a burial, a memory. The oubliette was the exact opposite. Its purpose was to turn a person into a non-entity before they had even died. It started with the fall into darkness, a terrifying break from the known world. It continued with the prospect of a slow, agonizing death from wounds, starvation, or dehydration. But the real horror was psychological. The total isolation, the sensory deprivation that makes you go mad, the torment of hearing the faint sounds of a life you'd been ripped away from. It was the slow, creeping realization that you had been completely and utterly discarded, thrown away to rot among the bones of those who were forgotten before you.
This punishment strips away every last shred of dignity and hope. It reduces a person to a terrified creature trapped in a hole, waiting for an end that can't come soon enough. Compared to that, the executioner's axe is a mercy. The O'Carroll clan perfected a form of cruelty that weaponized time, darkness, and despair. They created a hell on earth where the punishment wasn't death, but the agonizing, soul-destroying wait for it. Today, Leap Castle stands as a monument to this dark history, its stones saturated with the pain of those condemned to be forgotten. The story of the oubliette is more than just a gruesome piece of history. It's a disturbing look at the depths of human cruelty, and a stark reminder that the worst punishments are the ones designed to annihilate the soul. If you were captivated by the dark history of Leap Castle, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more dives into chilling stories from the past. For another tale of medieval horror, check out our video on the true story of the Tower of London's most infamous prisoner. Let us know in the comments below, was the oubliette truly a punishment worse than death?